Hello everyone, my name is John Flanders and I'm the Director of the Endangered Species Interventions Programme at Bat Conservation International. And today I'm going to be talking to you about Hill's horseshoe bat project we've been working on in Rwanda and how we found this incredibly rare and elusive species. But first of all, what is a lost species? I mean, the presence or absence of a species matters so much in terms of conservation biology, just because if it's not there and it's really not there, then we need to sort of focus on other priority species. If it's not found, but it's still there, it creates challenges because you don't know the life history traits or what actions are needed to save it from the brink of extinction. And that's one thing we're wrestling with in Rwanda with Hill's horseshoe bat, because there are many other competing interests uh, in any country for protecting rare and endangered species, and especially bats. And what was needed to determine whether or not it was still there or extinct. So Hill's horseshoe bat is incredibly rare bat, only ever been seen twice, once in 1964 and the other time in 1981. Both locations were within 8 kilometers of one another within Nyungwe National Park in Rwanda. According to the ICN, it's critically endangered, is thought to be a high elevation specialist. From the 2 specimens that are available, it has this amazing large nose leaf and ears, and it's incredibly fluffy. So that's what we know about it. But the question is how we go from not seen in 40 years to being found. And once it has been found, what do we need to implement to make sure it's not another 40 years before it's rediscovered again? As you might have seen by the large number of co-authors on the beginning of the slide, this was very much a team effort. This was members from BCI, from the Rwanda Wildlife Conservation Association in Rwanda, gorilla doctors in Rwanda. We had Paul Bala from Kenya, Prince Kaleme from DRC. Many people were involved in this, including, and I really want to give a big shout out to the Nyungwe Park Rangers themselves, because this really was in-country and in-park-led initiative with a little help from us. Including Wildlife Acoustics, we blitzed the park with, we used SM4s for this to get as much acoustic information we could. And we started building up, even though we didn't know what some of the bats were, some cool types to help us narrow down where the bat might be. So before we even stepped foot in the country, we sent over some SM4s, the rangers went out, and we started collecting as many of the constant frequencies of the horseshoe calls that we could to start prioritizing where in the park we should focus. And while in there, we set up harp traps, mist nets, we did cave surveys to see my feet below, we collected DNA from guano, all to help find this elusive species. Paul had led expeditions to Nyungwe in the past, but had never been successful. So really, within a 2-week period, we blitzed as much of the park as we could with all these different techniques to try and get us that little bit closer. And it paid off. It was almost towards the end of the trip, but finally, we caught one individual, again, very close where it was initially caught, despite going there multiple times before. And sure enough, it had big ears, big nose leaf, had a big fur, and we took some wing biopsy punches to genetics to confirm this was Hill's horseshoe bats, which we published. So if anyone's interested in reading more, we have the paper there. And it was fun. It made international news. We had Stephen Colbert give his report in the US, talking about its wacky face. But it gave us something to work on. It confirmed this bat was still in Nyungwe National Park. And that is incredibly important, because Nyungwe National Park is one of the last remaining, well, it's one of the last remaining natural areas in Rwanda. The park was recognized in 1903, and again in 1933 for its important forest reserve. However, since then it has kept reducing in size, and it has been the site where they've lost elephants and buffaloes due to overharvesting the wood and hunting of small mammals for food. Now, bats are not consumed in Rwanda. Hunting is not a thing, but habitat loss is. And between 1984 and 2015, another 15% of the park, unfortunately, was eradicated mainly due to forest fires. People are smoking out small rodents, also smoking out bees to collect honey, which creates these fires that starts reducing the number of available habitat available for anything, not just bats. So we really wanted to be able to show the Nyungwe Park Rangers and the Nyungwe Management Company where conservation efforts should focus on this species of bat. And we did this through acoustic monitoring using work we've done in Miami. You'll hear about that from Melky. Setting up these acoustic grids for partners to be able to collect this information and for, in this case, for us to analyze is critical. It took almost 2 weeks to catch, in the end, we caught 2 individuals of this species of bats. It's just a sampling effort that's unsustainable. Whereas acoustics, once you train people where the usual flight lines are for like Rhinolophus species of bats, it can provide a good way to show presence or absence. And I say with SM4 doing remote working, the log files, if anyone ever is interested, it provides a really useful resource for them to collect the data, send me the log files, I'll review the text files, make sure they're actually working properly, because the Nyungwe Park Rangers are incredibly busy. They do not have the capability in time-wise to actually analyze the data. So they went out, collected over 500 nights of acoustic monitoring data from 120 locations across the park, with 1.2 million files recorded. So this was a lot of data to process. So I was taking care of this to start with. We've now got a partner within RWC in Rwanda doing this now, so it doesn't have to leave the country. So we're actually getting a lot quicker in our throughput. About the 120 locations, we detected Rhinolophus hilli at 39 sites. And we can do things looking at time after sunset, calls were detected. How many calls were detected? Is it foraging area? Is it just an individual bat passing through? So this map here gives you a glimpse of presence, absence, but we're digging deeper into this data to really build better information about life history traits of these bats. But unsurprisingly, from what we found and what like the 2 previous records, there really is this hotspot of Hill's horseshoe bats in this area. It's called Uinka within Nyungwe National Park. But you can see that the range is larger than previously thought. But I have to say, a lot of these outskirt ones, it's like 1 or 2 lone calls, which is probably, I suspect a male probably is going further out, just trying to find other habitats. So we detected the bat. What's next? Well, we still don't know anything about its life history traits. Because it's Rhinolophus bat, there was indications according to the IUCN and by us that it could be a cave roosting bats. We surveyed a lot of caves during our first trip and didn't find any signs of this species. So it could, like all intents and purposes, it could be also a tree-dwelling bat. So we really don't know. We don't know where it eats. So just trying to get some more information was critical. So in August 2022, we got the band back together. This is some of the team here. And I really want to call out Peace, who is our bat coordinator in Rwanda, working for RWCA. And she has been phenomenal, along with Jean-Pierre here and Philbert, the 2 rangers who have really, in Nyungwe, have taken the lead and really been critical for us in providing this information. So armed with more acoustic information, they continue right up until now and into the future collecting acoustic information for us. Based on this, we started to hone down really where we want to be catching to maximize the number of Hill's horseshoe bats we can catch. Because the aim was to catch as many as we could, stick radio tags on their backs, and then follow them back, identify where they're roosting, possibly find home ranges where they're foraging at that time of year. that was the plan. Anyway, again, we had another 2-week expedition. We caught we caught bats. We didn't catch the right species of bats in the first week. As we're going through to the second week, things were getting incredibly nervous, especially for me with all the radio tags. We knew they were there. We were actually running acoustics, but it was just the lone individual, and they're very adept at missing heart traps and mist nets. So we weren't lucky in this, I have to say, although we did get some interesting results. So we caught 104 bats in the 10 nights we were catching, of 9 species of bats, which included the greater roundleaf bat, which is Dorina carinensis. Now, this is a data efficient bat. It had never been found in Nyungwe National Park before and has a very limited range across Africa. So this was a really nice finding, yet still not Hill's horseshoe bats. And if anyone wants to see my face when I find the roost of a Dorina, this is it. This is me sticking the microphone up into the tree and seeing the calls. So not Hill's horseshoe, but still an interesting record as well. And we caught other awesome bats, including slip-faced bats. These are Nycteris species, which are great. Now, similar to our first trip, we were kind of losing despair. We knew the bats were in the region. We could hear them, but we just weren't catching them. Fortunately, though, it was almost, again, almost on the last night. We still had a few nights left. We caught one female Rhinolophus hilli. The relief on my part was extraordinary, and we were able to catch this. Fortunately, she was female. She wasn't pregnant, so we could stick a radio tag on her back and follow her back to where she was roosting. Now, Nyungwe is the land of 1,000 hills. It really is tricky habitat to navigate, which meant a lot of running around up and down hills trying to find the reading from this radio tag. So we had 2 different antennas. We were going up and down different mountains. We finally got the ping from this species of bat, which interestingly for us, the first night, well, the first day after we tagged it, it was in some foliage. And here you can see us filming the bat just before emergence. You can see the antenna just on its back. And it's great to see. So that's Rhinolophus hilli under foliage. But if you radio track bats, especially the first day, they can be a little bit put out. So we wanted to keep following this day in, day out, and just make sure that is it a foliage rooster or was it just an oddity for that day? Turns out it was an oddity. We didn't detect it under foliage anymore. We instead tracked it back to this tree. There are very few large trees left in Nyungwe, partly because fires. This one actually was hollow because we think it was a lightning strike that did that. But we finally found this tree after a lot of searching, and then able to, again, this is the team watching the emergence. We were using infrared to carry out some counts, and we also were lucky enough to stick the infrared up into the tree without disturbing the bats. So this is the colony of Rhinolophus hilli that we saw, and I can get this to play. We were able to follow these bats, and there we go, and found this little pocket of Rhinolophus hilli. Now the tagged bat is in this cluster somewhere. I don't know exactly where, but there were 11 bats in this cluster that emerged. Now this is great because since August of last year, the bats have never moved. They've always been in this tree. The numbers have fluctuated a little bit between 6 to 11 individuals, but they've remained here, which has been great for us because one, it means we got some knowledge of the longevity of these roosts and how often they use them. Also meant the rangers could stick collection trays underneath this colony once a month and start to collect the guano. So we did that for both the Hill's horseshoe bat and the Dorina species. This is just from a very short pilot study we did, but we can start to gather information. We're going to get a really nice study of how the diet varies across the year as well, once we get all the guano from the long-term data long-term guano that we collected. So the next steps are just continuing to monitor this route. We really want to build up as much information as we can about the longevity of this. Unfortunately, this was the only tree that we identified because we only caught that one individual. We didn't want to catch bats directly out of the tree because we didn't want to create any more disturbance. And we're collecting the guano and sending that off for analysis. But beyond Nyungwe, we're starting to do more acoustic monitoring in other parks. Early on this year, Peace, Philbert, and Jean-Pierre went to Gishwati National Forest, which is here, which is the last known location in Rwanda for Rhinolophus ruwenzori, so ruwenzori horseshoe bats. And similar to Nyungwe, we're kind of doing the same thing. We're training the rangers how to do acoustic monitoring. We're starting to go through those. We're already getting some interest in constant frequency acoustic calls that we have no idea which species of bat it is. Interestingly, we detected Dorino in Nyungwe. We just didn't know which species of bat it was. So now we actually can kind of retrospectively put all those locations on the map for Dorino. And so we're going to do things. First off, we're going to do Gishwati. We're also doing Akagera this year with the ultimate aim of being Volcanoes National Park as well. And more of this will just be carried out by Peace, training rangers in different parks, and again, creating this really interesting and valuable acoustic monitoring network across all these national parks, where we can start piecing together more of the bat species and their acoustic signatures. So whether it be us or other people will be going and using these acoustic data to really highlight where targeted catching should be carried out. So we can start pairing up some of these bats that we don't know what their calls are with the acoustic signatures that we get. And that's critical because while in Nyungwe, we detected Rhinolophus landeri, which is the first known record of it in Nyungwe National Forest. Not the first record in Rwanda, but the first time it's been recorded in that forest. But we also caught, and we got the acoustic signatures of a Caravula species, though previously not been recorded in Rwanda. And of course, there was the Dorina species as well. So there's still so much more to be done, and it gave us a chance to train all our partners in the value of doing acoustic monitoring as well. A lot of catching and handling is carried out, but very few people are able to collect acoustic calls. So now we're doing that, we're really getting ingrained in the work in Rwanda. Hopefully that really help us gather more information as well and have a better idea of all the bat species in Rwanda and get that baseline data set as well. There's some really impressive reforestation projects in Gishwati right now, so we can see how bats recover, how maybe ranges extend, and how populations rebound. So we've been extremely happy with the outcome of this project, but really couldn't have been possible without the acoustic monitoring really guiding us where we should carry out these really specific interventions, especially with the catching survey. I mean, it took us almost 2 weeks to catch one bat in an area we know they were hanging out in. You can imagine if we didn't have that data behind us, we would just, it would have been an impossible challenge. And I'm really, really excited to see where the work in Gishwati and Akagera has taken us. Just, I love seeing these new calls. It's really interesting seeing what they could be, and inspiring to see how we're linking up these bats with new species for the country or just range expansions as well. So finally, I just want to thank all the partners involved in this, especially Nyungwe National Park, Rwanda Wildlife Conservation Association, African Parks, and Rwanda Development Board, who've really made all this possible as well. This was a great team to work with and a really exciting story. It's not often I get to help in rediscovering a bat that was thought lost for 40 years. So I hope you've enjoyed this. Thank you very much for listening, and yeah, feel free to ask any questions. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Wow, that was brilliant. It was almost like book at bedtime. It was like this really, really nice sort of happy ending to a story. Really kind of loved it. Absolutely brilliant. And it's strange work. I know Paul Wabala, but I know Peace as well from years and years ago. So I was like, I didn't know where she was working now, and that's like I didn't know she was working on the Hills project. So that's fabulous as well. So yeah, amazingly talented biologist. Yeah, so we've got questions coming in thick and fast, and you're getting lots of applause as well, which is always good. So if I just keep asking you them, and we'll keep going until either we run out or we run out of time, one of the two.
Far away.
So can you map the number of calls to get a sense of the population core range? How complex does that get if there are multiple populations?
We can. We're starting to do that. The interesting thing we are finding with this species is that as they emerge, they're actually echolocating really quietly. So we're actually picking up most of the calls really late on into the evening, like at dawn, where they're just hurrying back to their roosts. And this is where we're getting the most sort of concentrated calls. So it adds an extra dimension to this, and I think this is where we can look for lone calls, where it's probably just the odd individual passing by. But at the moment, Uwinka is the only core range we have for this species of bat. And again, yeah, we've only got one known tree that we found as well. So there are obviously more, but I think it just shows, just doing habitat surveys of the area, there are very few trees that can actually accommodate that species. So it really is an important area.
I mean, are you, again, this is something that I kind of want to know. Are you visually protecting that tree, putting a big fence around it so no one can get to it? Or are you going, well, it's a tree in a forest and nobody will do anything to it because it's a tree in the forest? Are you actually in active conservation on that one tree?
I mean, fortunately, the tree is really remote. Unless you have a GPS, you'd have no idea where it is. The rangers do. So, I mean, as part of the guano collection, they've been going there every month just to sort of double check things. But I mean, there's not much we can do to protect it. And I mean, there must be other trees in the area. The most important thing we can do, and this is what we're doing with the national park, is just protecting the large trees to make sure no more get felled, because we need those trees to just keep getting bigger and older so they start creating these hollows for other bats to use. And it's not just hilli, it's also like Dorina we found in a tree as well. There are many species of bats that will be tree roosting.
Need some hollowing out equipment. um, so it's a really good question. I think you sort of answered it, but I think it'd be good to revisit it. How challenging is it to radio track in a high elevated forest habitat?
I've done a lot of radio tracking in my time, and I really worried about Rwanda. Uh, it's Fortunately for us, it was somewhat easy because we were tracking the bat while it was active, and the team, especially the Rangers, are very fit, so they can kind of plow on ahead of the rest of us. And as long as we know roughly what direction, then we could basically run up to one of the mountains and then be at the top and then point down and just kind of get a direction. And that's what we had to do. It was grueling, but the mountains helped and hindered us at the same time. But by knowing which direction they were roughly moving in, we could send teams to get to high points.
Oh, fabulous. Uh, is it common for bats to eat Hymenoptera? I noticed that, they're in your slide that you listed.
I can't talk about all bats, but I did my PhD on Rhinolophus veraquinum, so the greater horseshoe bat in the UK, and they also eat. It's in the UK anyway. It's the Ophion wasp. They especially the spring, they'll fly through the swarms of them and just gobble them all up. So as far as I'm for Rhinolophus, no, that's actually a fairly common thing.
Very common thing. Quite an interesting one on the call, actually. How did you know the call characteristics of the horseshoe bat after decades of not being observed? So
Oh, this is where I can geek out a little bit. So
excellent.
Rhinolophus bats are one of the few species that give out really long, constant frequency calls. And because of that, if you have a long constant frequency call, it limits the number of species of bats it can be. And just by the length of the call, the shape, it's going to be a horseshoe of some sort. Now that there are multiple horseshoe bats in Africa, so there's like Rhinolophus landeri, guineensis, yeah, a whole host. I can't think of all of them off the top of my head. So it's a case of just making sure that we catch each species and start to do release calls and then match them up. And then when we have these gaps, we're like, oh, this could be interesting. So for us confirming we actually caught hilli, and then again, like the confirmed release call was just perfect for me. And again, I've worked on Rhinolophus bats and Hypsidraus bats in Africa and elsewhere for years. So I have the sort of joy of experience behind my ear as well.
Is there overlap as well? Are you finding that another species is calling similar to it and similar sort of frequency range, or is that not an issue?
No, this is very much a joy of constant frequency bats versus the FM bats, because with FM bats it can be a nightmare with overlap, but with CF bats they're usually pretty well partitioned. So if you get something at 35 kilohertz, it's going to be hilli. It's not going to be anything else.
Yeah. Impressive work, someone's just said. I was wondering, do you have any guides in identifying bat calls? Is there a website where these calls are deposited and can be accessed? Thanks a lot.
Depending where the world you are, I mean, in the UK, the US, I mean, there are good bat guides available. You just have to search. I mean, Wildlife Acoustics have some very good auto ID features as well, depending where you are in the world.
I was looking for my bat guide book, but I've put it somewhere. Oh no, I've
Yeah,
got one here.
mine's somewhere as well. But
No, that's a good
there
one.
we go. Perfect. If on to you. Globally, though, this is something that has been sort of a miss, but there are bat call databases starting to be set up. I know Mexico is starting their own one, and then coming out of Southeast Asia, but it's now global. There's Chirovox, which is a global bat acoustic database that researchers, including us, are submitting calls to. So that's another way. Again, it depends which country you're in, and how active researchers there are on acoustics.
I mean, there's the Zeno Canto, I've noticed, has started to accept bat calls now as part of their database, and that I think that's all freely available to anybody. But I think they've only just started, so their data set is very, very small. So put bats calls on any of these resources, and it'll help us all, which is be brilliant.
Exactly.
Um, well, you have some location data. Have you considered developing whoa, so everything's moving around, a species distribution model? An SDM could help identify areas to concentrate searches and trapping in the future.
I mean, we've considered. I use a lot of SDMs for other projects. The problem with Nyungwe is that it's so fine scale. We just don't have the resolution mapping wise, climate wise, to really help with that. Acoustics is really the way ahead in just presence or absence. I mean, the more locations we get this, it can help with SDMs in the future.
Yeah. What size is the hilly bat then? That's one of the questions. Is how big is it, or how small is it?
It's yeah, I mean, it fits in kind of the palm of your hand. So it's 12 to 15 grams. But anyone who's ever caught and handled a Rhinolophus bat, they're fun bats. They're shaped in like little barrels. They're just as almost as wide as they are long. So they've got really impressive. So they kind of look a little bit bigger than they are, but yeah, it's still pretty small.
Somebody actually put up that they quite liked, well, obviously we're both originally from the UK, and they quite like the way that we say incredibly fluffy. So
I mean, this
they
is a
like the
really
way you say incredibly fluffy. I don't know about me, but
well, this is actually a really interesting point about this species in that we've seen some convergent evolution. There's another high elevation specialist in Southeast Asia. And if you have both the bats, I've compared pictures, they're almost identical. They got this really long, thick fur, these really wide nose leaves, bigger ears. And I think they're in cold climates, they're foraging in like dense mist. So it's really interesting comparing this and going from studying like horseshoe bats in the UK to seeing this one with like really shaggy, fluffy hair. It was a fun bat to catch.
excellent. Amazing work by the whole team, John. I was wondering what inspired the search of this species after all these years, and also why was the species not recorded earlier, or was this the first study on bats there?
wasn't the first study. If anything, it was going to be the last. The IUCN needs to know whether or not species exist to help prioritize where conservation efforts focus. There have been multiple research attempts to try and rediscover hills, but it just hadn't been found. So we were getting to the point where people were coming to us and asking us if this bat was still extant or whether or not we had to start thinking about listing it as extinct. So that's really why we wanted to focus, just to help. Should we keep putting money into trying to protect the species of bat, or do we have to unfortunately say it's no longer there? Let's focus on another species. Fortunately, we found it, so all is good.
Wait, my work here is done. Did you actually say those words when you?
I do remember just sitting down on the floor and just trying to take it all in because it was. I think we were working 18-hour days on that first expedition, just to try and catch it.
I was gonna one of the things I was gonna say, did you actually sleep on that? Because it looked quite arduous. The terrain and everything looked really quite tough.
Yeah, there was a lot of driving as well. Fred has an amazing photo of me. After we caught it, I think I just sat down next to this bridge and I just passed out. I was just asleep and people just walking over me and everything else. But yeah, it's just relief, I think.
We're going to run out of time. But there's more and more questions coming in, but I'm going to pick a couple. How did you decide upon the spatial distribution of the recorders?
Oh, so it's a little bit ad hoc in a way, initially anyway. So we don't want to create any additional work for the Nyungwe Park Rangers. So we're working with them who are going out doing patrols like daily anyway. So our arrangement with them is that they take a couple of SM4s with them. When they're at a convenient location, just install them, leave them out, and their patrols normally last a few days, nights anyway. And then they collect it on their way back. And then we analyze the data. So we've been doing that since 2018. Now we've actually put a grid over the park. So we're starting to look at where the recorders haven't been put and then suggesting we focus more on those efforts when they go out more into those different areas. So ideally we don't want to create excess work for anyone because everyone's stupidly busy anyway. Now we're actually just trying to expand it just to like map the whole park acoustically.
Oh, it sounds amazing. Another couple of quick questions, and we might have called it a day. But does your group offer internships or apprenticeships with the project helping with gathering acoustic data?
Sadly, we don't. That we're just working with in-country partners. Everything is in-house, run by Nyungwe National Park.
Yeah, and we did have some people from Rwanda that have said hello from Rwanda in the chat as well, which is
Yeah, I
like
think I saw
lovely.
Peace on this. So
Oh, it's
Peace is
peace. Hello,
amazing,
peace.
and yeah, we couldn't do this without her.
Excellent. Just one more question, I suppose. What are the characteristics of this type of tree that helps to accommodate this specific species of bat? I mean, we know it's hollow, but is there anything that's characteristically different to anything else?
I think just big enough to actually create a hollow that the bats can hang up in. I mean, and this is one of the problems that a lot of big trees get felled for building materials, for a lot of other things, or to get destroyed in fires. Fires can be beneficial if the tree's big enough because they can survive and it can create some of these hollows. But the bigger the tree, the better because it creates more opportunities for roosting bats.
Are there is I know I asked this question at the beginning about specific management for trees, but is there sort of thought about sort of ring barking a few or doing anything to in effect kill off some trees to so you got the habitat for the future, or is that not you're not there yet?
The biggest problem is actually having enough big trees. A lot, even though it's a national forest, a lot of trees have unfortunately either been cut down or just got burnt to the point with no return. Um, a lot of people were collecting honey by smoking out wild bee populations. Nyungwe National Park has done an amazing job at setting up a farming, like a bee farm cooperative now they've got their own hives. They don't actually have to harvest wild honey. So that has dramatically reduced the number of wildfires in the park. Also, just working with poachers to try and eliminate all these wildfires because it's just decimating the bigger trees. So just really looking after the forest and making sure the trees can get old and big enough to support bat colonies in the future.
Yeah, no, it's a brilliant project, and thanks so much for talking about it. I think everyone, well, you got lots of like clapping, I'm sure you will do in a minute. But the questions that we've not got through, John will have a go at answering them in the Q&A as well. So he was going to keep working for a minimum of 18 hours today just to keep those answered. So thanks once again, John. That was amazing. Really enjoyable talk. You've set the
Yeah,
bar
thank you.
high now.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.